Congratulations. There you go. That's what I have to say for Meek. Congratulations to Meek Mill. He was released this week from jail. Now this is in lieu of his trial happening, and I had like a little prepubescent voice crack there, but this is in lieu of his trial happening. Now, Judge Janice Brinkley will still be presiding over that case, even though she has been urged and asked by the local Supreme Court affiliate in Philadelphia to recuse herself of the case. She refuses. Now, Meek was picked up from jail. Ruben, I believe, owner of the 76ers, picked him up. I think he was also met by Mr. Bob Kraft. Now, let's talk about the irony of Bob Kraft being so involved in Meek's case. Bob Kraft, owner of the New England Patriots. Bob Kraft, who, along with other NFL owners, decided that Colin Kaepernick should not have a job because he took a knee. He exercised his Fifth Amendment rights to say, you know what? Black and brown people are being killed at the hands of police, and I want to bring attention to that. So Bob Kraft doesn't think that that's right? He thinks that is something wrong, that Colin Kaepernick should not have done that. However, he does find umbrage with the fact that Meek Mill has been locked up unjustly. But he doesn't see how those two things coincide. You don't get it, Mr. Kraft? So that leads me to believe that there is an invested interest by not only Grubman, but I don't know if the guy who owns the 76ers last name is Grubman or I don't know, whatever his name is, and Robert Kraft and all of these people, Meek, who have taken an odd interest in your release. I challenge those people to also, it's not just because Meek was locked up in jail and the unjust of it. It is the unjust that you should be looking at of all people of color and why it is wrong. And that includes Mr. Colin Kaepernick, Mr. Bob Kraft. You don't just get to, and now also let me just say this. Robert Kraft is a huge trumpet, okay? He is a huge trumpet, okay? He lives for the Trump hive, okay? So, I don't know. I just found it ironic, and I don't really know what to think about any of those affiliations that have been going on there, but I'm glad that Meek is home. If you have been, again, ironically, just locked in the whole idea that Meek is home and there's going to be a party and Meek got to come home and put Gucci on and he got the best this and a helicopter came and picked him up, you are again focused on the wrong thing. Meek do look good though, don't he? He look good. He looked good. He looked like he put a little weight on that jail weight. That's just jail weight, honey. If you know anybody who got to jail, that's just a little jail weight. He'll shed it soon enough, But he looks good. I thought he looked really, really good. And I was definitely most happy that he got to spend time with his son. I know that while he has been locked up, he did not want his son to see him locked up. So him seeing his son at this time was the first time he had seen his son in months because of the fact that he did not want his son to come and see him in jail, which I totally understand. Speaking of just reform, just something else that's been going on in politics this week. So there's been a lot of talks about criminal justice reform and prosecutors, or as we know them to be, district attorneys. The whole thought from a federal perspective is perhaps, and even from a state perspective, is perhaps we're giving our prosecutors, our district attorneys, too much power. Now, that's something to definitely look into, because with all of the things that we cannot change, what we can change is every time that there is a new cycle for us to vote for a new district attorney, that is an opportunity for us to align ourselves politically with someone who holds not only the values of disenfranchised people highly, and they're not just looking for another win for a prosecutor team, but they're actually looking to get justice for victims, on whatever side that needs to be. That's really what you would hope that a district attorney would do. Just, it's not about the win. You know what I mean? It's about, I need to get justice for victims. So, in most cases, there are positive and negative attributes to the whole prosecutorial district attorney kind of those cases, and how they are given the power to preside. But for instance, there's been a lot of cases where, for instance, in Meek's case, it didn't work because of Janice Brinkley. However, the local Philadelphia prosecutor, Krasner, he's been working with the DA's office to basically tackle some huge issues that not just affect them on a local level, but affect the U.S. by and large, which is mass incarceration and overcriminalization. And when we talk about mass incarceration, we have to understand that we're not just talking about men here, because there is also, whether or not you know this, there has been a high increase of brown and Latino women or women of color being incarcerated, especially within the last 2 years. There's been a rise in women being incarcerated. And when you talk about these incarcerations, you have to also, if you look at Meek's case, some people don't have the money for the bond, so they end up dying in jail or suffering a longer fate because they just don't have the money to meet the bond. One of the things that Jay-Z talked about in his interview with David Letterman was the Kalief Browder case, which is something that I believe Tidal and Jay-Z's film company did a documentary on. And Kalief Browder was a young guy who was in jail in Rikers for a long period of time because he was unable to make the bail. He had spent an unbelievable amount of time in solitary confinement, which, if anyone knows that the emotional and the mental effects of that are very long lasting. And so Kalief ended up committing suicide upon his release, because I think emotionally and mentally, it just became too much for him to deal with. So please, if for nothing else, if this Meek case can bring you closer to anything or can teach you anything, hopefully it teaches you that you need to pay attention to who your constables are, who your local appellate judges are, who your who your district attorneys and prosecutors are, because there is a huge problem with mass incarceration and overcriminalization. But one of the things and shout out to Philadelphia and their DA Krasner. If you have ever lived in Philly, you know the law office of Krasner and Ahmadinejad. Yeah, them. They, yes, I'm talking about that Krasner. They have decided that they will no longer bring charges for marijuana possession in prosecutorial or district attorney cases. They will, cases of petty theft will focus more on restitution than it will the actual punishment. And they even, for low-level criminal activities, what they want to do is leave the burden on the state to justify the cost to taxpayers for incarcerating someone who is a low-level offender. So I think that that's something that we should be pushing all of our local prosecutors to do. Because until we do that, I think that we're all going to be in the sunken place, to be honest with you. We're all pointing our fingers at Kanye like, oh, you're in the sunken place. But by the sheer fact that we are not supporting proposals and acts and laws that work in our benefit, and we're not supporting people and educating ourselves to policies and politics that work to our benefit, one could also say that we're in the sunken place. Life comes at you fast, and we all have a bunch of stuff to do, but it is our responsibility. It is our earthly responsibility to be accountable for not just the stuff that we know, but for the stuff that we don't know. The information superhighway will get you anywhere. Just look it up. Oh, okay. So, I was telling you guys that I was going to talk about Beachella, but what I want to talk about is, okay, so why y'all trolling Michelle Williams for? What's the problem here? Because I saw a lot of like weird news this week about Michelle Williams and her engagement, and the big quagmire, is her man Chad Johnson white or no? So just to answer the question, Chad Johnson is in fact white. Chad Johnson, who is engaged to Michelle Williams of Destiny's Child. Now, apparently people are gagging because of his alleged alt-right affiliations, as well as his Blue Lives Matter affiliations. And not just him, but his family as well. Now, just so that we're on the same page, we all know that alt-right is basically comprised, it's almost like a spun internet political group, if you will, that they're comprised of people who basically reject mainstream conservative politics, and they basically cape up for extremist beliefs, which are typically routed in white nationalism. So I hope that her man is not a white alt supporter, or alt-right supporter, excuse me, white alt. But hopefully he's not an alt-right supporter, because that would be really disheartening. Now, professionally, he is a pastor to not only at a predominantly African-American church, but he is also chaplain to several NFL teams. And, one person on the internets, which I won't say his name because I kind of felt like what he did was a little unjust in terms of putting Michelle Williams and her man's business out there. But, you can Google it. He definitely talked about the fact that her man is white, and the fact that her man seems based on the programs that he follows and based on his likes on social media, seems to be affiliated with alt-right and Blue Lives Matter groups. That would be really cray. Okay. So that's all I got this week for Powerful Bottoms. Oh no, excuse me. Speaking of powerful and hitting the bottom, Bill Cosby was found guilty on all 3 counts of his indecent assault trial. Cosby, who is currently 80 years old, can stand to spend up to 10 years on each count, which would amount to 30 years in prison. At 80 years old, that would put him at getting out at about 110. So let's be honest. I don't think that Bill Cosby is going to spend, I think it's sad that he will spend the rest of his life in jail. But again, I think that this is no different than Kanye, where you have to separate the art from the level of accountability that needs to happen. And one of the things that I often find is that in these situations where we've put these people on pedestals because of their art, and we then find out there's a level of disappointment there that exists, I just think that perhaps it's time for us to get to a place of mindfulness where we are sourcing out real heroes, and that we are turning into the heroes that we strive to seek in other people. I mean, here's the thing. These people are all human. They are going to make mistakes. They're going to do, as we all do, they're going to do things that kind of leave us bewildered in terms of, hey, how could you do this? Your art's so amazing. I didn't know you could be such a terrible person. But that could be said of any one of us. And I really I'm not justifying anything that happened with Bill Cosby. What I am saying is that this has been a really difficult week for us in terms of, hey, here's